For 20 years, I lived a lie, until I discovered that my husband's country house was worth $25 million in hidden gold. But what hurt the most wasn't the financial betrayal. It was realizing I had been invisible in my own life. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for just a second, this feels familiar to you, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Barbara Thompson. I'm 61 years old, and until recently, I thought I knew my place in this world. Every morning I would wake up at 5:30 in our home in Maple Creek, Connecticut, with those stone walls that had witnessed far too many silences. The cold tile floor under my bare feet reminded me that another day was beginning just like the last. Invisible, silent, useful. My routine was perfect in its monotony. I'd make coffee in the old Italian mocha pot I had bought with my own savings 15 years ago, back when I still thought small domestic decisions mattered. The aroma of roasted coffee filled the kitchen while I squeezed fresh orange juice. The kind Richard, my husband, always said was too pulpy but drank anyway, as if he were doing me a favor. Richard would come downstairs at 7 o'clock sharp, always with that look of annoyance he had perfected over our 23 years of marriage. His 65 years showed more in his temper than in his physique. He had developed that quiet cruelty some men cultivate when they feel life hasn't given them everything they deserved. "Good morning," I'd say, handing him his mug of coffee exactly how he liked it, black with a splash of cream. He would respond with a grunt, his eyes fixed on his phone, scrolling through the Wall Street Journal app or reading messages he never shared with me. It had been like this for years. I spoke to a wall that occasionally made sounds of disapproval. That October morning, as he ate his breakfast in silence, I watched his wrinkled hands hold the mug, hands that had once caressed my face when we were young, when we lived in that tiny apartment in Boston, and he promised me we would build something beautiful together. Now those same hands felt alien to me, as if they belonged to a stranger who had taken the place of the man I once loved. The phone rang. It was our daughter, Lucy. "Dad, I need you to wire me $2,000. Mark is having trouble with the company and we can't make the kids' tuition payment this month." I heard the conversation from the kitchen, where I was washing the breakfast dishes. Richard agreed immediately, with that generosity he always showed our children but never extended to me. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll do the transfer this afternoon." When he hung up, I dared to approach him. "Richard, could you give me some money for the market? I need to buy vegetables and—" "Again?" he interrupted without looking up. "I gave you $50 last week. What do you spend it on? It's like money just slips through your fingers." $50 to feed a household for a week. While my daughter received $2,000 without question, I had to justify every cent spent on tomatoes and olive oil. "It's just that prices have gone up, and with winter coming I need to get some more meat for—" "Barbara," he said my name as if it were an inconvenience. "Learn to manage your money. We're not millionaires." That sentence stuck in me like a splinter. "We're not millionaires," said the man who had just sent $2,000 without blinking. The same man who drove a brand new BMW and bought himself $150 shirts every month. That afternoon, after he left for his office in downtown Maple Creek, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the scent of garlic and rosemary that permeated the walls. In my hands, I held an electric bill, $280. Money I would have to beg him for, as always, while he sighed as if every household expense were a personal conspiracy against his well-being. It was then that his cell phone, which he'd forgotten on the table, rang. The screen lit up with a text message. The contact name sent a chill down my spine. "Jessica, my gem." Without thinking, I touched the screen. There was no passcode. Richard had always been careless at home, knowing I would never dare to go through his things. The message was simple but devastating. "My love, I can't see you tonight. Barbara's home and she's been so needy lately. But tomorrow, when I go to check on the country house, we could meet there. I'm dying to show you my secret treasure." Jessica's reply came instantly. "Your secret treasure? You mean the thing you told me about with the boxes? I'm dying to see it in person. Is it really worth as much as you say?" "25 million, my love. And my old fool of a wife has no idea. She thinks that house is a ruin." My hands started to shake. The kitchen spun around me as if the floor had turned to quicksand. $25 million. The country house I cleaned every summer, where I had broken my back sweeping debris and clearing cobwebs while he said it, wasn't even worth the paper the deed was written on. I kept reading, mesmerized by the horror. When I get rid of Barbara, it will all be ours. I've already spoken to my lawyer about the cleanest ways to do it. A nursing home, an illness, something that won't raise suspicion. Get rid of me. The words floated in the air like toxic fumes. My husband of 23 years, the father of my children, was planning to make me disappear from his life like someone getting rid of old furniture that is no longer useful. I dropped the phone as if it were burning. It hit the tiles with a sharp crack that echoed in the empty kitchen, just like the echo of my own life. Dry, empty, unimportant to anyone. I sat on the floor, next to the broken phone, and for the first time in years, I cried without trying to be quiet. I stayed on the kitchen floor until I heard Richard's keys in the door. I quickly wiped my tears, picked up his phone, and left it exactly where I had found it. When he walked in, I was peeling potatoes for dinner, faking a normality that no longer existed. "How was your day?" he asked, as always, without really expecting an answer. "Fine," I lied, while my hands trembled over the knife. That night, lying next to him in the bed we had shared for over 2 decades, I watched him sleep. His snores filled the room with the same monotonous noise as always, but now they sounded different, like the breathing of a stranger, like the breath of someone who could plan my disappearance in his sleep. The memories began to flood in like an unstoppable avalanche. 20 years of my life flashed before my eyes like a movie that suddenly had a completely different meaning. I remembered when I sold my mother's jewelry to help him set up his first office. They were the only valuable things I owned: a pearl necklace my mother had inherited from her grandmother, a pair of white gold earrings she had worn at her wedding. I took them to a pawn shop in Boston, shaking as the appraiser offered me a ridiculous sum for heirlooms that were priceless. $15,000, he had said. "It's the most I can offer." I returned home with the cash in wrinkled bills and handed it to Richard with a smile, believing I was investing in our future. "Thank you, Barbara. This is going to change our lives," he had said, kissing my forehead. But our lives didn't change. Only his did. With that money and other loans that I co-signed on, papers I barely understood, he started his financial consulting firm. A firm that for years he told me was barely making ends meet, while I continued to buy the store brand everything at the supermarket and mending my own underwear. Then came the time of silent sacrifices. When Lucy needed money for her master's degree at NYU, I was the one who worked cleaning houses in the afternoons, after my own household chores. I remember my hands, chapped from the water and chemicals, hiding the sores from the harsh detergents under gloves. "Don't tell Dad I'm working as a cleaner," I begged Lucy when she came to visit. "You know how he is about his reputation." She nodded, but she never asked why her mother had to hide an honest job. She never questioned why she received $500 transfers every month for her expenses, while I wore the same winter coat for 5 years. And when Daniel, our youngest, had that motorcycle accident near his college in Ithaca, it was me who pawned my wedding ring to pay the hospital bills the insurance wouldn't cover. Richard was having cash flow problems at the firm, as he explained with that look of concern I believed was genuine. "It's temporary, Barbara. As soon as I close the deal with the Germans, we'll get everything back." I never got my ring back. And the deal with the Germans closed 2 months later, but my ring remained at the pawn shop until the time limit expired and it was sold. But what hurt the most now, with this new perspective, were the small daily slights I had normalized, like the time his partners came over for dinner, and he introduced me by saying, "This is Barbara, my wife. She takes care of the house." Not my wife, who also has a university degree in art history. Not my wife who speaks 3 languages. Just, she takes care of the house, as if that were my sole purpose in life. Or, when my old college friends invited me to a reunion, and he told me, "Why would you want to go? You don't have anything interesting to tell them. Besides, you'll stick out with your clothes." I stayed home, watching from the window as other women my age gathered in restaurants, laughed, shared professional achievements, while I washed dishes and waited for him to come back from his business dinners, which I now suspected included Jessica. Jessica, I didn't even know her last name, but I already hated her with an intensity that scared me. How long had she been in our lives? Had she been at our family dinners, smiling while I served dessert? Had they laughed at me together? The next morning, Richard got up earlier than usual. I watched him from the bed, pretending to be asleep, as he showered and put on a new shirt. A shirt I hadn't seen before, light blue, which brought out his gray eyes. "I'm going to the country house," he announced. "There are some issues with the roof structure. I'll probably be late." A lie. He was going to meet Jessica to show her his secret treasure. Those $25 million hidden in a property that I had cleaned, swept, and maintained for years without suspecting a thing. After he left, I went to the closet in his office. I had never gone through his papers because he always said that numbers weren't my thing, that I should worry about the important things in the house while he handled the serious matters. Among invoices and business documents, I found the deed to the country house. He had inherited it from his father 5 years ago, but according to the document, the property was valued at a mere $40,000. A ruin, he had always said. More of an expense than an investment. But if there were $25 million hidden there... The phone rang. It was Daniel. "Mom, could you lend me $1,000? I have to pay my car insurance and I'm a little short." "Honey, you know I don't handle that kind of money. Talk to your father when..." "Mom, please. Dad already told me not until next month. You've always been able to figure things out." I had always been able to figure things out. Yes, by selling my belongings, working in secret, borrowing from my sisters, while Richard hoarded millions in a house that I myself kept in perfect condition for his secret trysts. "Let me see what I can do," I told him, knowing I would have to ask my sister Carol for a loan, who worked at a nursing home in Waterbury and earned less than I did when I was cleaning houses. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than resignation. I felt rage. A clean, pure rage that warmed my chest like a burning coal. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. 61 years old. Gray hairs I no longer bothered to dye because why waste money on vanities, according to Richard. Wrinkles around my eyes that told the story of years of smiling when I didn't feel like it, of apologizing for existing, of being grateful for crumbs of affection. But in those tired eyes there was something new, a spark I hadn't seen in decades. That afternoon, I took the bus to the country house. I needed to see with my own eyes what exactly my husband was planning to share with his lover, using money I didn't know existed while denying me $50 for the weekly groceries. The ride took an hour. The whole way, I watched the rolling hills of Connecticut from the window, remembering all the times I had made that same trip to clean a house I thought was worthless, while Richard and the kids stayed in Maple Creek, resting from the week. When I arrived, the house looked the same as always. Gray stone, peeling green wooden shutters. The garden I had tended for years without receiving a single word of thanks. But now I saw it with different eyes. Somewhere in that structure that I knew inch by inch, there was a $25 million secret, and I, the old fool who takes care of the house, was going to find it. The key was still where we always hid it, under the pot of red geraniums by the back door. For years I had used that key to let myself in and clean, never imagining I was accessing my own betrayal. The house smelled of dampness and that mix of dust and old wood that characterized rural New England constructions. My footsteps echoed on the terracotta tile floor as I walked through the rooms I knew by heart. Everything seemed normal. The furniture covered with white sheets, the windows with their shutters closed, filtering only a few rays of golden light. But there was something different, a scent I couldn't identify. It wasn't the usual smell of neglect. It was something metallic, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I started my search in the study, a small room with shelves full of books I had never seen Richard read. The walls were covered with photos of his father with various local politicians from the 80s. I had always thought it was pure nostalgia, but now I wondered if those connections had been more useful than I imagined. I moved some books, checked behind the paintings, knocked on the walls searching for hollow spots. Nothing. The floor seemed solid, the tiles firmly in place. Frustrated, I sat in the old leather desk chair and looked around. That's when I noticed something odd about one of the floor tiles. It was a slightly different color, as if it had been recently replaced. I knelt and touched it. It was loose. Using my fingernails, I managed to lift it. Underneath was a metal box, the size of a shoebox. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. It was much heavier than I expected. I opened it, and the world stopped. Gold bars. Small, the size of a smartphone, but unmistakably real. Each one was engraved with numbers and official seals. I quickly counted. 20 bars in that box. My heart was beating so hard I thought I might faint. If this was just a sample, I kept searching with a determination I didn't know I possessed. In the master bedroom, I found another loose tile under the marital bed where Richard surely planned to bring Jessica. More gold. In the basement, behind a stack of old firewood that I had arranged myself last summer, there was a false wall. When I pushed it open, I almost fell backward. A secret room. Small, but filled with metal boxes stacked with military precision. Each box was numbered and dated. The oldest was dated 1995, 2 years after our wedding. For 28 years, my husband had been accumulating a fortune while I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for his business expenses. I opened several boxes at random. They all contained gold, bars, coins, ingots of different sizes. Some had seals from Swiss banks, others from institutions I didn't recognize. In a notebook, I found entries in Richard's handwriting. Dates, codes, quantities. Deposit March 1998, 50 units. Source, Malaga contract. Transfer December 2001, 75 units. Source, Marbella Development. Withdrawal July 2005, 25 units. Payment, Lucy's University. My daughter's education had been paid for with gold I didn't know existed, while I worked cleaning houses to send her money for her daily expenses. I kept reading. There were entries up to last month. Deposit September 2024, 30 units. Source, Barcelona Commission. Note, B doesn't suspect. B doesn't suspect. Me, Barbara. The idiot who didn't suspect. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a car approaching on the dirt road. Panic. I quickly closed the boxes, put the false wall back in place, and ran upstairs, replacing the tiles. When I heard the keys in the front door, I was in the kitchen, pretending to check the pipes under the sink. Barbara? Richard's voice sounded alarmed. What are you doing here? I came to check for leaks, I lied, standing up and brushing the dust off my skirt. After last week's rain, I wanted to make sure there wasn't any damage. He studied me suspiciously. It was the first time in years I had taken an initiative without consulting him. How did you get here? By bus. I took the 3 o'clock. And did you find anything? A few leaks in the upstairs bathroom. Nothing serious. He seemed to relax, but he continued to watch me with a look I now recognized as that of a man assessing whether his victim suspected anything. Fine. Next time, let me know before you come. You could have run into the contractors and we would have wasted the trip. Contractors? Or Jessica? We drove back to Maple Creek in his car, in silence. He drove while checking messages on his phone at red lights. I stared out the window, processing what I had seen. $25 million. Possibly more. A fortune accumulated over decades while I saved pennies buying store brands at the supermarket. That night, during dinner, I watched him as if I were truly seeing him for the first time. Every gesture, every word, every look now had a different meaning. You know what? He said as he cut the chicken I had cooked. I'm thinking of selling the country house. I choked on my water. Selling? Why? It makes no sense to keep a property we don't use. It's just maintenance costs. Maintenance costs that I covered with my free labor, I thought. But it was your father's house. It has sentimental value. Sentimental value doesn't pay the bills, Barbara. Besides, it's barely worth $40,000. With that, we could do some renovations here at home. $40,000. When I had seen with my own eyes more than 500 times that amount hidden in its walls. Do you have a buyer already? There are a few interested parties, people who want country houses to restore. Lie after lie. He needed to sell the house because his relationship with Jessica was getting serious. He needed to liquidate the gold to start a new life. and I was destined to disappear in the process. After dinner, while he watched the news in the living room, I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in years, I didn't see a defeated woman. I saw someone who had just discovered she had cards to play in a game where she thought she could only lose. The next day, when Richard left for work, I called my sister Carol from the house landline. "Carol, I need to ask you a huge favor. Could you lend me $1,000? $1,000? Barbara, what happened? Daniel needs money for his car insurance, and Richard says he can't help until next month." Silence on the other end of the line. "Barbara, I work in a nursing home. Where am I going to get $1,000? "I know. I'm sorry. It's just that—" "No, wait. You haven't asked me for money in years. Are you okay? Did something happen?" My younger sister, who earned less than $1,000 a month caring for the elderly in Waterbury, was asking if I was okay while I lived with a man who had $25 million hidden away. "No, everything's fine. It's just that you know how strict we are with money. Barbara, your husband runs a successful firm. Why can't he lend his own son $1,000? I didn't know what to say. Because for years I had normalized Richard's stinginess. I had justified his control over money. I had accepted that I had to solve family problems by selling my few belongings while he managed the important expenses. "Never mind, Carol. I'll figure it out." "No, wait. I have it saved to fix the roof, but Daniel is my nephew. I'll give it to you." I hung up and cried. My sister, who worked double shifts to make ends meet, was offering me her only savings, while my husband slept on a fortune he had been hiding from me for 3 decades. That afternoon, I made a decision. I was going to take pictures of everything I had seen. If Richard was planning to get rid of me, I was going to make sure I had something to protect myself. The next day, I went back to the country house. This time, I was prepared. I brought my old smartphone with its camera, a small flashlight, and even a tape measure to calculate the dimensions of the secret room. I had decided to document everything before deciding what to do with the information. For 3 hours, I photographed every box, every bar, every page of Richard's notebook. I wrote down serial numbers, dates, anything that could serve as evidence. As I worked, I couldn't stop thinking about all the times I had asked for money for basic expenses while he was literally sleeping on millions. When I finished, I had over 200 photos on my phone. Enough evidence to prove that my husband had been lying for decades about our financial situation. The trip back to Maple Creek felt eternal. On the bus, surrounded by retirees returning from their shopping in neighboring towns, I felt as if I were carrying a bomb in my purse. What was I going to do now? Confront him directly? Find a lawyer? Tell the children? The children. Lucy and Daniel had grown up watching their father treat me like a poorly paid housekeeper. They had normalized the fact that I had to ask for money for everything while they received transfers without question. Did they know anything about the gold? Or were they as much victims of the deception as I was? I decided to start with Lucy. She was the older one, always more perceptive. If anyone could help me understand the magnitude of this situation, it was her. I called her that same afternoon. "Lucy, could you come over? I need to talk to you about something important." "Did something happen with Dad?" Her voice sounded worried. No, it's complicated. I'd rather tell you in person." She arrived 2 hours later, straight from her job at a marketing consultancy in New York. At 35, Lucy was a more elegant version of me at her age. Tall, with dark hair, and those big eyes she had inherited from my mother. But there was something in the way she dressed, in the confidence with which she moved, that painfully reminded me of her father. "Mom, you're worrying me. What's going on?" "Sit down, please." I showed her the photographs, one by one. At first, she frowned, confused. "What is this? Where did you get these pictures?" "From your father's country house. All of this is hidden there." Her face gradually changed from confusion to disbelief, and then to something I couldn't quite interpret. "Mom, this can't be real. Dad has always said we barely have enough for basic expenses." "Lucy, there are $25 million hidden in that house. I've seen the notebook where your father keeps the accounts. Some of your university expenses were paid with that gold." She was silent for several minutes, looking at the photos on my phone. "Are you sure it's real? What if it's fake gold? Look at the seals, the serial numbers. This is real, Lucy. But why are you telling me? What are you going to do? I don't know. That's why I need your help. I need to understand if you knew anything. If Daniel knows anything. Of course I didn't know anything. Her response was too quick, too defensive. Lucy, Mom, this is very serious. If Dad has all this money hidden, oh my God, where did he get it? Is it legal? That question hadn't occurred to me. What if the gold came from illegal activities? What if Richard had not only deceived me, but was also involved in something dangerous? I don't know, honey. That's why I need you to help me decide what to do. Lucy stood up and began pacing the living room, biting her nails like she did when she was a little girl and nervous. Mom, this could destroy the family. If you report Dad, report him? Who said anything about reporting him? Well, if that money is, if it's not clean, you could go to jail too. You live in the same house, you share his assets. In the eyes of the law, you're an accomplice. Accomplice. The word hit me like a punch. I had gone from being a victim to a potential criminal in a matter of minutes. Lucy, I didn't know anything about this. But who's going to believe you? You've been married to him for 30 years. You've shared bank accounts, properties. A judge will think it's impossible that you didn't know anything. Panic began to take hold of me. What if Lucy was right? What if by discovering the gold, I had become a retroactive accomplice to my husband's crimes? What do you advise me to do? Lucy sat next to me and took my hands. Her fingers were cold. Mom, I think you should think this through very carefully before you do anything irreversible. Dad isn't perfect, but he's not a monster either. Maybe there's an explanation for all of this. An explanation for having $25 million hidden away while I sold my mother's jewelry to pay his expenses? I don't know, Mom. But destroying the family isn't going to bring back Grandma's jewelry. Something in her tone bothered me. It was the same condescending tone her father used when I questioned his financial decisions. You know what, Lucy? Forget I told you anything. Clearly, you weren't the right person to ask for advice. Mom, don't be angry. I'm just trying to protect you. Protect me? Or protect your father? She fell silent. In that silence, I understood something that broke my heart. Lucy was more worried about the consequences the truth might have than about the injustice her mother had suffered for decades. That night, after Lucy left with promises to talk more about this when we've had time to think, I called Daniel. Honey, could you come for dinner tomorrow? It's been a while since we talked. Sure, Mom. Is something wrong? No, I just feel like seeing you. Daniel arrived the next day with a bottle of wine, and that carefree smile I had always found so charming. At 32, he worked as a software engineer for a video game company. He was more like me in character. Calm, without great material ambitions. Happy with a simple life. During dinner, I avoided the topic. I wanted to observe him, to see if there was any sign that he knew anything about his father's business. How are things with Dad? He asked as I served the roast chicken. Same as always. Why do you ask? I don't know. He seems more stressed lately. He called me yesterday asking if I needed money, which is weird because usually I'm the one who has to ask him. My stomach tightened. Was Richard trying to secure the children's loyalty before doing something drastic? And what did you tell him? That I'm fine. Although, to be honest, the car insurance is killing me. $1,000 a year is outrageous. There was my opportunity. Daniel, do you know if your father has significant savings? Investments he doesn't talk about? Why do you ask? It's just that sometimes it seems strange that we have to be so tight with money when he runs a company that is apparently doing well. Daniel shrugged. Dad has always been very private about money. He says it's because he grew up poor and is afraid of going back to that. Grew up poor? Daniel, your grandfather owned land in Connecticut. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't poor either. Well, you know how Dad is with those things. He likes to be dramatic. I showed him a photograph of the gold. Just one. Daniel, have you ever seen this before? He froze, staring at the phone screen. Mom, what is this? Where did you take this? Answer my question. Have you seen it before? No, never. Is that real gold? Yes. And there's a lot more. I told him everything. Unlike Lucy, Daniel listened without interruptions, without being defensive, without trying to protect anyone but me. Mom, This is unbelievable. All this time we thought Dad was just cheap, but he was actually, what do you call it? A con man? I don't know, son. I don't know what your father is. Daniel got up and started pacing the kitchen, clearly agitated. Mom, you have to report him. This isn't right. Huh? What if the money isn't legal? What if I go to jail for being his wife? Then we'll find a lawyer to defend you. But you can't keep living this lie. The difference in my children's reactions broke my heart. Lucy, who had gone to college thanks to that stolen gold, advised me to stay silent. Daniel, who had received fewer financial favors from his father, encouraged me to seek justice. That night, lying next to a placidly snoring Richard, I made a decision. I was going to find a lawyer. But first, I needed more information about where that gold came from. The next day, when Richard left for work, I searched his office thoroughly. In a locked drawer, which I managed to open with a bobby pin, I found documents that confirmed my worst suspicions. Contracts with names I recognized from corruption scandals on the news, invoices for consulting services to companies that had been investigated for money laundering, and, most terrifying of all, a draft of a letter addressed to Jessica where he talked about liquidating the problematic assets and starting over in another country. My husband hadn't just stolen my life. He was preparing to make me the scapegoat for his crimes. That letter to Jessica was the last straw. They weren't just planning to run away together. They were going to make me responsible for all the dirty money he had been laundering for decades. While I slept next to him every night, he was planning my destruction with the same coldness he used to choose his ties in the morning. I put all the documents in a plastic bag and hid them in the attic space of the guest room closet, along with copies of all the photos of the gold. If something happened to me, at least there would be evidence of what was really going on, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. Every time Richard spoke to me, every time he accidentally brushed against me in the hallway, I felt a physical revulsion that was hard to hide. It was like living with a dangerous stranger who knew all my habits, all my weaknesses. On Monday morning, when he left for work, I did something I had never done in 30 years of marriage. I went to the bank alone and asked for information about our joint accounts. The teller, a young woman with stylish glasses, looked at me with some surprise when I explained that I wanted to see the status of all the accounts with my name on them. Mrs. Thompson, I see here that you have 3 joint accounts with your husband, but only one has regular activity. The other 2 are practically empty. Could you give me the statements for the last 5 years? Of course, but I'll need you to sign an authorization form. As I waited for the documents, I sat in the bank's plastic chairs and watched the other people. Retirees checking on their pensions, young mothers opening savings accounts for their children, business owners reviewing loans, normal people living normal lives, without secrets of 25 million hidden in country houses. The statements confirmed what I already suspected. Richard had been transferring money from our joint accounts to other accounts where I had no access. For years, he had literally been stealing my own money. When I got home, he was already back from work. He was in his office, talking on the phone in a low voice. When he saw me, he hung up quickly. "Where have you been?" he asked with a suspicion he no longer bothered to hide. "At the bank. I wanted to check on our accounts." His face turned pale. "What for?" "To understand why you always say we have no money when I need something." He rose from his chair with the expression he got when he was about to lose his temper. "Barbara, don't meddle in things you don't understand. The family finances are my responsibility." "Your responsibility?" "Richard, my name is on those accounts. I have a right to know where my money is." "Your money?" He laughed bitterly. "What money are you talking about? Everything we have, I've earned through my work." It was in that moment that something inside me broke. 30 years of keeping quiet, of accepting humiliation, of justifying his behavior, all crumbled at once. "Your work?" I shouted. "You call hiding stolen gold in a house that I clean for free while you deny me $50 for groceries work?" The silence that followed was deafening. Richard stared at me as if he had seen a ghost. "What are you talking about?" "I know about the country house, Richard. I know about the gold. I know about Jessica. I know everything." He slowly sat back down in his chair, calculating every word before speaking. "Barbara, you don't know what you're talking about. If you saw something that confused you, don't treat me like I'm an idiot. My voice was louder than I expected. I've seen the gold bars. I've seen your notebook with the accounts. I've seen the documents with companies being investigated for money laundering. You've been snooping through my things. I've been searching for the truth in my own house. For 30 years you've lied to me. You made me live like a pauper while you hoarded millions. You've humiliated me. You've belittled me. You've treated me like a servant. Barbara, keep your voice down. The neighbors will hear. I don't care about the neighbors. I don't care about anyone. I'm sick of living your lie. Richard got up and closed the office door. When he turned back to me, his expression had completely changed. There was no longer a trace of the man who pretended to care about my well-being. Fine. Since you know everything, let's be clear. Yes, I have money saved. Yes, I have investments you don't know about. So what? I'm the one who works. I'm the one who takes the risks. You take care of the house, as it should be. As it should be? Richard, I sold my mother's jewelry to finance your firm. I worked cleaning houses to pay for Lucy's education. I pawned my wedding ring to pay for Daniel's hospital bills. Nobody forced you to do any of that. Those words hurt more than any physical blow. I realized I was arguing with someone who was incapable of feeling remorse, incapable of acknowledging the harm he had caused. You're right, I said, surprising him with my sudden calm. Nobody forced me, but nobody is going to force me to keep living like this either. What do you mean? I mean, it's over. I'm not going to live this sham with you anymore. He laughed that cruel laugh I had come to hate so much. And what are you going to do? Divorce me? Barbara, you're 61 years old. You don't have a job. You have no savings. Who's going to support you? I'll manage. With what? You didn't even finish your degree. You're too old to find a job. Without me, you're nothing. Those words, which for years would have crushed me, now gave me strength. Because for the first time, I clearly saw who my husband really was. A manipulator who fed on my insecurity. You might be right, I said. Maybe I am nothing, but I'd rather be nothing than be your accomplice. My accomplice? What are you talking about? I know the money isn't clean, Richard. I know you work with companies being investigated by the police. And I know you plan to blame me when it all comes out. His face fell completely. You're crazy. No one will believe you. We'll see about that. That night, I slept in the guest room for the first time in 30 years. I locked the door and lay down on the twin bed where my sisters used to sleep when they visited. The room smelled of mothballs and neglect, but I felt safer there than in the marital bed I had shared with a stranger for decades. The next day, when Richard left for work, I did something I had been putting off for years. I called a lawyer. Robert Davis had his office on a quiet street in the historic downtown of Maple Creek, near the town square. He was an older man, around 70, with the serene authority that comes from years of experience. I told him everything. I showed him the photographs, the documents, the bank statements. He listened without interruption, taking notes in a worn leather notebook. Mrs. Thompson, he said when I finished, this is very serious. Not just because of the amount of money involved, but because of its origin. If your husband is laundering money from illicit activities, you could be in danger. In danger? Legally and physically. People who handle this kind of money don't usually let witnesses speak freely. A chill ran down my spine. What do you advise me to do? First, protect yourself. Don't go home alone. Let someone you trust know your whereabouts at all times. Second, we need to prepare a police report, but it has to be very well documented. And third, you need to think about where you're going to live when this all comes out, because your marriage is going to end one way or another. I left the lawyer's office with a plan. For the first time in years, I had a plan that didn't depend on Richard's approval, that didn't require me to ask for permission to exist. That afternoon, I went to the bank and opened an account solely in my name. I deposited the $500 I had saved in secret, money I had been putting away penny by penny for years by buying store brands instead of name brands. It was a ridiculous amount compared to Richard's millions, but it was mine. Completely mine. When I got home, he was already there, waiting for me in the living room. Where have you been? Organizing my life. Barbara, we need to talk. We have nothing left to talk about, Richard. Yes, we do. What you're doing is insane. You're going to destroy the family for nothing. For nothing? You call 30 years of lies nothing? Listen to me carefully, he said, getting up and approaching me with an expression I had never seen before. You are not going to do anything stupid. You are not going to talk to anyone else about this, because if you do, I swear you will regret it. It was the first time in 30 years he had openly threatened me, and strangely, instead of scaring me, it calmed me, because he had finally shown his true face. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. Fine. Consider me warned. I walked up the stairs to the guest room, feeling his gaze fixed on my back. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly, because I had made the first truly my own decision in decades. The next day, I was going to change my life forever. Early Friday morning, I was woken by the sound of drawers opening and closing downstairs. I looked at the clock, 3:15 in the morning. I got up silently and peeked over the staircase. Richard was in his office, frantically moving papers around. He was destroying evidence. I went back to my room and from the window, I watched him load several boxes into the trunk of his BMW. His movements were those of a desperate man who knew his time was running out. At 4 in the morning, he left, without a word, without a note. He didn't come back all day. On Saturday morning, Mr. Davis called me on the landline. Mrs. Thompson, I have news. I've been looking into the companies from the documents you showed me. 3 of them are being investigated by the IRS for money laundering. If your husband has worked with them— He left last night, I interrupted. He loaded boxes into his car and disappeared. Silence on the other end of the line. That confirms our suspicions. Mrs. Thompson, you need to file the report immediately. If he flees the country with that money, it will be impossible to recover. And if the authorities find him before we file the report, you could be considered an accomplice. What do I need to do? Come to my office first thing Monday morning. Bring all the original documents you can find. We're going to file a complaint for embezzlement, concealment of assets, and possible money laundering. IKEA, after hanging up, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee and processed the magnitude of what I was about to do. I was going to report the father of my children, the man with whom I had shared 30 years of my life. I was going to expose him publicly, to destroy the image he had built over decades. But I was also going to get my dignity back. On Sunday, Lucy showed up at the house unannounced. She had that tense expression she wore when she was about to ask me for something difficult. Mom, Dad called me. He's very worried about you. Where is he? He didn't tell me. But he says you're acting irrationally. That you've hired a lawyer to attack him. Attack him? Lucy, your father has been stealing from me for 30 years. He hid millions while I sold my mother's jewelry to help him. Mom, families protect each other. They don't destroy each other over money. That sentence broke my heart. My own daughter had chosen to protect the man who had humiliated me for decades, rather than support the mother who had raised her with love and sacrifice. Lucy, do you know what your father said to me the last time we spoke? He told me that without him, I'm nothing, that I'm too old to find a job, that I don't have a degree, that no one will support me. Mom, you know what? He might be right. Maybe I am nothing. But I'd rather be nothing than be the idiot who cleans the house while he hides millions to spend on his mistress. Lucy turned pale. His mistress? I told her about Jessica, the messages, the plans to get rid of me. I watched her shrink with each revelation, as if the words were physical blows. No, that can't be true. It is true, Lucy. And if you continue to protect him, you become his accomplice. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. I'm going to report him. She stood up abruptly, tears in her eyes. Mom, if you do that, you destroy the family. Daniel and I will be branded as the children of a criminal. My kids will grow up with that stigma. And me? What about me, Lucy? Do I have to keep living a lie to protect your reputation? It's not just our reputation. It's our financial survival. If Dad goes to jail, who's going to pay my mortgage? Who's going to support the kids while Mark looks for a job? There it was. The truth. Lucy wasn't protecting her father out of love, but out of financial dependency. They had all lived off Richard's generosity without questioning where the money came from. And now that the source was in danger, I had become the threat. Lucy, I understand your concerns, but I can no longer be the victim so that you can continue to be the beneficiaries. Mom, please, think about it one more time. Talk to Dad. I'm sure he can explain everything. Maybe the money is legal and you're just misinterpreting things. Misinterpreting? Am I misinterpreting that he has a mistress? Am I misinterpreting that he plans to blame me for his crimes? I don't know, Mom, but destroying the family isn't going to fix anything. After she left, I called Daniel. I needed to know if he had also chosen his father's side. Daniel, your sister came by to convince me not to report your father. And what did you tell her? That I'm going to do what I have to do. Good. Mom, I've been thinking about this all week. I've looked at all the transfers Dad has sent me over the years. I never questioned where he got so much money to help us. Now I understand he was buying our silence. What do you mean? I mean, every time we needed money, he appeared as the savior. He kept us dependent on him so we would never question anything. It's pure manipulation. My younger son had understood in a week what my older daughter refused to accept after years of evidence. Daniel, are you prepared for the consequences? If I report your father, your life is going to change. Mom, my life already changed when I found out my father is a criminal who abuses my mother. I'd rather be poor, but honest than rich, thanks to dirty money. That night, I slept more peacefully, knowing that at least one of my children was on my side. On Monday morning, at Mr. Davis's office, I signed the complaint. 30 pages detailing 30 years of deceit, humiliation, and financial crimes. As I wrote my name on each page, it felt as if I were signing my own Declaration of Independence. What happens now? I asked. The police will investigate. If they find sufficient evidence, they will issue a warrant for his arrest. In the meantime, we will request a preventative seizure of all known assets, including the country house. And me? You will be considered the primary victim and witness. Your cooperation with the justice system will protect you from any accusations. I left the office feeling strangely light. For 30 years, I had carried the weight of a life that wasn't mine, of lies I hadn't chosen, of humiliations I didn't deserve. Now, for the first time, I walked without that weight. That afternoon, Richard called me from an unknown number. Barbara, what have you done? What I had to do. Do you know what you've just accomplished? You've destroyed your own family. Lucy is devastated. Daniel won't speak to me. The grandchildren will grow up knowing their grandfather is in jail because of their grandmother. Because of his crimes, Richard. Not mine. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her husband succeed. I'm a woman who got tired of living your lie. Barbara, withdraw the complaint. There's still time. We can fix this. Split the money. Start over. There's no going back, Richard. You're going to regret this. You're nothing without me. You'll end up alone, destitute, while I start a new life with someone who actually values me. I'd rather be alone and destitute than be with you and humiliated. I hung up the phone and disconnected it. It was the last conversation I would ever have with the man who had been my husband for 30 years, but had never been my partner. That night, alone in my empty house, I poured myself a glass of wine that I had bought with my own money from my new bank account, and I made a toast to the woman who had taken 61 years to be born. 2 days later, the police arrested Richard at JFK Airport as he was trying to board a flight to Switzerland with 2 suitcases full of gold bars. The local news reported on the Connecticut businessman arrested for money laundering and embezzlement. His picture was in all the papers, in handcuffs, with that look of shock and rage he reserved for when things didn't go his way. Jessica was also arrested as an accomplice. It turned out she was an employee at one of the banks where Richard laundered the money. Their great love had, in fact, been a criminal enterprise. The judge froze all of Richard's known assets, including our house and the country house. But because I had cooperated with the authorities and had been proven a victim of his deceit, the court granted me the right to remain in the family home until the case was resolved. For the first time in 30 years, I lived alone in my own house, with my own rules, making my own decisions, and I discovered something wonderful. I didn't need anyone's permission to exist. The first few days after Richard's arrest were strange. The house, which for decades had been a place of tension and forced silence, suddenly felt mine. For the first time in 30 years, I could come downstairs in my pajamas without anyone commenting on my appearance. I could have breakfast whenever I wanted, watch TV late into the night, and leave dishes in the sink if I didn't feel like washing them immediately. Small freedoms that other people took for granted became personal revolutions. The first morning I woke up without the sound of Richard's alarm, I stayed in bed until 9. Unthinkable for the past 3 decades. I made coffee just for myself, without calculating if there was enough for him. I put on classical music while I ate breakfast, something he had always criticized as old people's music. The phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted my side of the story. Neighbors called with curiosity disguised as concern. And Richard's acquaintances tried to find out if I knew where he had hidden more money. After the 3rd day, I just stopped answering. Daniel came to visit me every evening after work. At first, he used the excuse of making sure I was okay, but it soon became clear that he also needed to process what had happened. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about us as a family," he told me one afternoon as we had tea in the kitchen, "about how we normalized Dad's behavior toward you. It's not your fault, Daniel. You were children when all this started, but we weren't children when we grew up. We should have said something when he talked down to you in front of us. We should have questioned why you had to ask for money for everything while he bought himself whatever he wanted." It was the first time anyone in my family had openly acknowledged the abuse I had suffered. I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. "The important thing is that you see it now," I told him. "You know what hurts the most? That I benefited from that dynamic too. Whenever I needed money, I knew it was easier to convince you than to ask him directly, because you always found a way to get it." Daniel. "No, Mom. Let me finish. I used you, just like he did. I made you the go-between for my financial problems because I knew you wouldn't say no, that you'd find a way to help me even if you had to sacrifice your own needs." He was right. My children had learned to manipulate my unconditional love just as their father had manipulated my marital loyalty. "But the difference is that you recognize it," I told him. "And that means you can change it." Lucy, on the other hand, barely spoke to me. When she did, it was to inform me about the legal complications of the case, as if I were responsible for the consequences of filing the report. "Dad's lawyer says that if you cooperate with the prosecution, they might reduce his sentence," she told me over the phone one afternoon. And? Mom, he's the father of your children. Don't you care if he spends years in prison? Lucy, do you care that I spent years living a lie? Silence. "That's different." "Why is it different?" Because Dad never hit you. He never screamed at you. He treated you well. He treated me well? Lucy, your father constantly humiliated me, controlled me financially, isolated me socially. Just because he didn't hit me doesn't mean he didn't abuse me. It's not the same as physical violence. Who decides which kind of violence counts and which kind doesn't? Silence again. "I don't know, Mom. I just know that we used to be a family, and now everything is broken." "No, Lucy. Before, we pretended to be a family. Now we're finding out who we really are." After that conversation, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years. I called my sister Carol in Waterbury. "Carol, it's Barbara." "Barbara, I saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm different. Could you come visit me this weekend?" "Of course. I get off work Friday and I'll catch the bus." Carol arrived on Friday night with a bag full of homemade muffins and that warm smile she'd always had, even when working double shifts to make ends meet. We stayed up talking in the kitchen until 2 in the morning, just like when we were teenagers sharing secrets while our parents slept. "Barbara, I've spent years wondering why you never complained about Richard when it was obvious he didn't treat you well." "Was it obvious?" "To anyone who truly loved you, yes. The way he spoke to you in front of the family, how he'd cut you off when you were telling a story, how he minimized your opinions. I always thought you put up with it because he gave you financial security. The irony of it all. It turns out the financial security existed, but he was hiding it from me. You know what makes me happiest about all this?" "What?" "That you're finally fighting back. For years, I watched you become a shadow of your former self. The Barbara I knew when we were young was brave. She had opinions. She laughed with her whole body. That woman gradually disappeared until all that was left was someone who apologized for existing. Her words hurt because they were true, but they also brought relief, because someone had noticed my disappearance and was happy about my return. That night, lying in separate beds in the guest room like when we were little, Carol asked me, "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. For the first time in 30 years, I don't have a plan. And it's terrifying, but it's also liberating." "Have you thought about selling the house when the trial is over?" "Constantly. This house holds too many painful memories." "And where would you go?" "I don't know. Maybe somewhere close to you. Maybe to a small town where nobody knows me. Maybe abroad. You know, I've never traveled alone. I've never made a major decision without consulting someone else." Well, it's time to start. On Monday morning, after Carol left, I did something I had never done before. I went to a travel agency. "I'd like some information on trips for a single, older woman," I told the young agent who helped me. "Do you have a destination in mind?" "Anywhere I can walk on a beach without anyone knowing my name." She gave me brochures for the Florida Keys, the California coast, and New England in the fall. For the first time in decades, I had the luxury of choosing something based solely on my own desires. I picked a small hotel in Charleston, South Carolina, facing the ocean, for a week in November. It would be my first trip alone, my first completely selfish decision in 30 years. When I got home with the plane tickets in my hand, I sat in the living room where for years I had watched television in silence while Richard controlled the remote, and I laughed. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. That same afternoon, Mr. Davis called with news about the case. "Mrs. Thompson, the prosecutor has accepted a plea deal with your husband. He will plead guilty to money laundering and concealment of assets in exchange for a reduced sentence. 8 years in prison instead of 15. And what does that mean for me? That the legal process will be much faster, and that you will be entitled to financial compensation for damages. The court has valued your cooperation and your status as a victim. A significant portion of the recovered assets will legally be yours." "How much?" "We're still calculating the total, but we're talking about several $1,000,000. Several $1,000,000. After decades of begging for $50 for the weekly groceries, I was going to have more money than I had ever dreamed of. What will I have to do to receive it? Nothing more than what you are already doing. Continue to cooperate with the justice system. Continue to be honest about what you knew and what you didn't." That night, I made a special dinner just for myself. I bought a nice bottle of wine, lit candles, and put on music I loved. I ate in the dining room where for years I had served dishes chosen by others, and I toasted the woman I was discovering I could be. The next day, as I was walking to the market, I ran into Mrs. Gable, a neighbor who had always been kind to me. "Barbara, how are you, dear?" "I'm doing well, thank you. I saw the news. I just can't believe what happened with Richard. I couldn't believe it either until a few weeks ago. You know what? I always thought you were too good for him. It always seemed to me that he didn't value you as he should. It was strange to discover that other people had seen what had taken me 30 years to recognize. Thank you for saying that. Are you going to stay in the neighborhood?" "I don't know yet. I'm exploring my options." "Well, wherever you go, I hope you'll be very happy. You deserve it after everything you've been through." I continued walking to the market with a smile on my face. For the first time in years, someone had told me I deserved to be happy. And for the first time in years, I believed them. That afternoon, while organizing papers in what had been Richard's office, I found a letter he had written but never sent. It was addressed to me and dated 6 months prior. "Barbara, when you read this, I will have likely already taken the necessary measures to protect our assets. Do not be angry with me for the decisions I have had to make. Everything I have done has been for the good of the family." Even in his private confessions, Richard was incapable of taking responsibility for his actions. It was all for the good of the family. Necessary measures. Difficult decisions. Never an acknowledgement of the harm caused. Never a sincere apology. I tore the letter into small pieces and threw it in the trash. It was time to stop looking for explanations that would never come, and apologies that would never exist. It was time to live for myself. 2 years later, I am sitting on the terrace of my condo in Charleston, watching the sunset over the Atlantic Ocean. The sun sinks below the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. And for the first time in decades, I am in no hurry for the day to end. There are no dinners to prepare for anyone else. no schedules to keep, no humiliations to endure in silence. The sea breeze rustles the white curtains of my living room, a space I've decorated exactly as I wanted, with light colors, plants that flourish because no one tells me they're too much work, and books piled on every surface because I finally have time to read without being criticized for wasting time. The trial ended a year ago. Richard was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and I received a settlement of $4 million. An amount that still feels unreal when I look at my bank account, but that has given me something more valuable than financial security: the freedom to choose. I chose to sell everything. The house in Maple Creek, with its poisoned memories, was sold to a young family who will fill those rooms with genuine laughter instead of tense silences. The country house, where the gold was hidden, became a bed and breakfast. It's ironic to think that other tourists will walk through the places where I discovered the betrayal of my life, without knowing the story those walls hold. With part of the money, I bought this oceanfront condo in Charleston, in a building where other older people live who, like me, have decided that the final chapters of their lives deserve to be written in beautiful places. My neighbors are an eclectic mix. Eleanor, a retired professor who teaches painting on the beach; Antonio, a widowed doctor who tends a rooftop garden; and Claire and Joe, a couple who met in their 70s on a tour and decided it's never too late for love. Daniel comes to visit every couple of months. Our conversations are different now. We talk like adults who respect each other, not like a son asking for money from an automatically obliging mother. He has started therapy to understand how the family dynamic affected him, and with each visit, I see less of the manipulative behavior he learned from his father. "Mom, you know what I love most about seeing you now?" he said on his last visit as we walked along the beach at sunrise. "What?" "That you have opinions on everything. On politics, on the books you read, on the movies you see. For years, I only heard you talk about household chores and other people's needs. Now you talk about your own thoughts." He was right. For decades, I had silenced my opinions to avoid conflict. I had limited my conversations to safe topics that wouldn't bother Richard. Now I was discovering that I had a lot to say about the world. Ideas that had been hibernating for years, waiting for a chance to be expressed. Lucy and I have found a difficult but necessary balance. She visits twice a year, always with her children. At first, our conversations were tense, full of unsaid reproaches and unhealed wounds, but gradually, we have learned to meet on the common ground of our love for the grandchildren. "Mom, I have to admit something," she said on her last visit, while my grandkids played on the beach. "For months, I thought you had destroyed our family on a whim, that you had exaggerated things with Dad. And now I see who you are when no one is controlling you. I see how you talk, how you move, how you make decisions. You're a completely different person. And that's made me realize that the person I knew as my mother was just a censored version of you." That conversation didn't heal all our wounds, but it opened the door to the possibility of an authentic relationship between us. I've started doing things I never thought I would. I take Italian classes twice a week because I always wanted to visit Tuscany, but Richard said it was money thrown away on frivolities. I learned to swim at 63 because the ocean was right there waiting for me, and I no longer had to ask anyone for permission to use my time as I pleased. But perhaps the most transformative thing has been the volunteer work I do at a local women's shelter. 3 afternoons a week, I support women who are where I once was, lost, scared, and convinced they are worthless without the man who was breaking them. "How did you know it was time to leave?" Maria, a 40-year-old woman with 2 young children, asked me during one of our talks. "I didn't," I answered honestly. "It took me 30 years to leave. There was no single moment of divine revelation. It was the accumulation of 1,000 small humiliations, until one night I realized I would rather be alone and poor than accompanied and humiliated. What if I'm wrong? What if I really am the crazy one like he says? Maria, the men who love us don't make us feel crazy. The men who love us don't isolate us from our families. They don't control every dollar we spend. They don't constantly criticize us until we lose faith in our own judgment." Seeing the transformation of these women, some who manage to escape, others who need several attempts, some who sadly return to their abusers, has helped me understand my own story. I wasn't an idiot for staying so long. I was the victim of a system of manipulation designed to do exactly that, to make me stay. On weekends, when I don't have volunteer commitments, I explore the Southeast on my own. I've visited Savannah and Asheville, always with my small rolling suitcase and my travel guide. In each city, I stay in modest but clean hotels, like any other tourist, and discover the freedom of eating when I'm hungry, resting when I'm tired, and changing my plans if I don't like something. On one of those trips, in a cafe in Savannah, I met Frank. Not Robert Davis the lawyer, but Frank Miller, a 68-year-old retired history professor who was sitting at the next table reading the same book as me, Women Who Run with the Wolves. "Interesting choice of reading," he said with a smile when our eyes met. "My first completely free choice in decades," I replied. And that spontaneous honesty started a conversation that lasted 3 hours. Frank lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago. Unlike Richard, he speaks of her with genuine tenderness, like someone who truly shared a life with another person instead of owning them. He doesn't pressure me for anything, doesn't try to control my decisions, doesn't offer opinions on how I should spend my money or my time. "You know what I like most about meeting you at this age?" he said during one of our walks through Forsyth Park. "You come without the emotional baggage of youth. You know who you are, what you want, and what you won't tolerate. I don't know if Frank will become something serious. Frankly, I don't care to know. For the first time in my life, I am enjoying the company of a man without needing to immediately define the future, without fear that my independence will be a threat to him. In the evenings, when I return from my Italian classes or my volunteer sessions, I sit on this terrace with a glass of crisp white wine and watch the sea. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just watch the seagulls or the fishing boats returning to the harbor. Sometimes I call my sister Carol, who is still working at the nursing home, but can now afford small luxuries like visiting me on her vacation. "Do you regret anything?" she asked during her last visit. "I regret taking so long. I regret all the nights I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong, when the question should have been why I was tolerating being treated so poorly. And the money? Do you feel guilty having so much after living with so little?" At first, I did. But then I understood that this money isn't a prize. It's compensation for 30 stolen years. And the best way to honor those lost years is to use this money to live the life I always deserved. This morning, I received a letter from Richard from prison, the first in 2 years. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the kitchen table while I had breakfast, while I read the paper, while I watered my plants. When I finally opened it, I found exactly what I expected: manipulation instead of apologies, victimhood instead of responsibility. "Barbara, I hope you're satisfied with what you've achieved. You've destroyed a family for money. Our children are suffering the consequences of your revenge." I didn't finish reading it. I tore it into small pieces and threw it in the trash, just as I had done with that letter I found in his office. I no longer need his explanations, his justifications, his attempts to rewrite history, because I have learned something fundamental. People who truly love us don't make us explain why we deserve respect. Tomorrow is my 64th birthday. It's the first birthday in decades that I will celebrate exactly as I wish, with dinner at my favorite restaurant by the harbor, accompanied by Frank if he decides to come, or alone if I prefer solitude. Afterward, I will come home and raise a glass to the woman it took me 61 years to meet, but who was worth the wait. Because this story isn't about the gold I found hidden in a country house. It's about the gold I found hidden inside myself, the ability to say no, the courage to choose solitude over humiliation, and the wisdom to understand that it's never too late to start over. Have you, or someone you know, been through something similar? Tell me in the comments. If this story has touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it.